Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. The radio crackled to life at 7:13 a.m., pulling David Mercer from his second cup of coffee. 22 years patrolling Olympic National Park had taught him to read urgency and static, and this call carried weight. Ranger Mercer, this is dispatch. We have a situation. David set down his mug, noting how the morning light struggled to penetrate the fog rolling through the Hoh rainforest. October mornings here felt like breathing through wet wool. Go ahead, Linda. Missing person report. 26-year-old female, Megan Hartley, photographer from Portland. Checked into Hoh River Trail campground yesterday afternoon. Tent found empty this morning, sleeping bag still warm. Her hiking partner says she left around 6:30 to photograph the sunrise near the Cathedral Grove area. David was already reaching for his gear. Cathedral Grove, where the Sitka spruces grew so massive their roots created labyrinths, where moss hung like theater curtains, where the Quileute people had warned about boundaries for generations. Equipment status? That's the strange part. Her camera bag was found approximately quarter-mile up the trail. Cameras, lenses, tripod, all there. Wallet and phone inside. Nothing appears stolen. David felt something shift in his chest. Not quite alarm, but recognition. In 2 decades, he'd worked 14 missing person cases in this forest. 12 had ended with the hiker found safe, usually embarrassed. 2 hadn't ended at all. I'm en route. ETA 15 minutes. Have you contacted? Her parents are driving up from Portland. Should arrive by noon. David. Linda paused and he heard her office chair creak. Her friend says Megan was excited about photographing something specific. Kept talking about the old mother. The old mother. David's jaw tightened. Every veteran ranger and Olympic knew that name, though few said it aloud. The local tribe spoke of a spirit bound to the ancient Sitka spruce that predated European contact, a guardian of sacred ground, patient until provoked. Understood. Mercer out. He loaded his pack with practiced efficiency. First aid kit, emergency blanket, GPS unit, satellite phone, water purification tablets, emergency flares. His fingers moved through the ritual while his mind traced the Cathedral Grove trail system. Elevation gain, 800 feet over 2 miles. Typical hazards, root systems, seasonal flooding, black bear activity. Atypical hazards, the kind that made experienced rangers avoid certain areas after dark. The drive to the trailhead took him deeper into the temperate rainforest, where trees grew so thick that mid-morning felt like dusk. His truck's headlights caught walls of green, sword ferns taller than a man, vine maple twisted into impossible shapes, nurse logs supporting entire ecosystems of rebirth. At the trailhead, he found Megan's hiking partner, a young man named Colin, sitting on the bumper of a Subaru Outback, face pale beneath his beard. Ranger Mercer? Colin stood quickly. Thank God. I've been calling for her, but tell me exactly what happened. David kept his voice level, professional. Panic was contagious. Colin ran a hand through his hair. Megan's been planning this trip for months. She's working on a photo essay about old-growth forests. Yesterday we talked to some locals at the visitor center, and an old woman told her about a specific tree. Said it was the oldest living thing in the park, hidden off the main trail. Megan got obsessed. Last night, she studied maps until midnight, cross-referencing landmarks. Did this woman give a name? No, she drew a map on a napkin. Told Megan that the tree remembers when the forest was young, but that photographs require permission. Colin pulled out his phone, showing David a photo of the napkin. The crude drawing showed a fork in the trail, then a series of symbols that looked like bear tracks leading northwest. David studied the marks. They weren't bear tracks. They were traditional Quileute warnings. Boundary, sacred, turn back. This woman, what did she look like? Old. Native American, I think. She wore this incredible necklace made of... Colin stopped. Why? Because David had worked this forest for 22 years and knew every local guide, every volunteer, every elder who visited the park. Because he'd never seen anyone matching that description. Because the tribes didn't draw maps to sacred sites for tourists with cameras. Stay here, David instructed. I'm going to follow the trail. If I'm not back in 4 hours, or if you don't hear from me via radio, contact dispatch and request additional resources. Shouldn't you wait for backup? In 4 hours, hypothermia becomes a serious concern. David hefted his pack. I know this forest. The Ho River Trail began innocuously enough. Well-maintained boardwalks elevated above the perpetually damp earth, interpretive signs explaining epiphytes and ecological relationships. But David wasn't following the main trail. He veered northwest where Megan's abandoned camera bag had been found, marked now with evidence tape that fluttered in the breeze like prayer flags. He knelt, examining the ground. Boot prints, women's size 7, tread pattern consistent with Mercer hiking boots, led deeper into the forest where no official trail existed. David photographed the prints with his park-issued camera, noting how they were evenly spaced, unhurried. Megan hadn't been running. She'd been walking with purpose. Following the tracks required concentration. The forest floor here was a chaos of decomposition and growth. Fallen logs thick as cars, ferns erupting from every gap, moss swallowing evidence within hours. But David had tracked lost hikers through worse, and Megan's prints told a story. She'd been alone, moving steadily uphill, pausing occasionally. At one pause point, he found a fresh disturbance in the moss. Kneeling again, David discovered Megan had set up her tripod here, evident from the 3 small depressions. He looked up, following her likely sight line. The tree stood 70 feet ahead. David had hiked past this area dozens of times without noticing it, a testament to how completely it blended with the forest's architecture. The Sitka spruce rose like a cathedral column, its base so massive that 6 people couldn't encircle it with linked hands. The bark was deeply furrowed, holding entire gardens of moss and lichen. Branches began 40 feet up, spreading into a canopy that filtered sunlight into a dim, greenish underwater quality. But it was the roots that arrested David's attention. They erupted from the earth in great twisted arches, creating chambers and passages beneath the tree. In the largest chamber, he saw what had drawn Megan. A natural altar formed where 3 roots met, draped with moss that glowed almost luminescent in the filtered light. Beautiful, pristine, utterly alien. Megan! His voice seemed to die in the moss, absorbed before it could echo. Megan Hartley, this is Park Ranger David Mercer. Silence. Not even birds. David circled the tree slowly, documenting everything with his camera. No signs of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric. He completed a full circuit and found something that made him stop. On the far side of the tree, someone had arranged stones in a careful pattern, not random, but deliberate. 7 river stones, each the size of a fist, placed in a semicircle. And in the center, reflecting the weak morning light, was Megan's watch. He bagged it as evidence, noting the time displayed. 6:47 a.m., exactly when Linda had said Megan's phone last showed activity. David keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Mercer, Static answered. He tried again. Nothing. The radio worked perfectly, green light, full battery, but produced only the soft hiss of dead air. His satellite phone showed the same issue, full signal, no connectivity. Professional training fought against instinct. The rational explanation: he was in a dead zone, some geological quirk interfering with signals. The irrational explanation: something didn't want him calling for help. He photographed the stone circle, noting how the moss around it appeared pressed down as if something heavy had rested there recently. The watch sat in the exact center, undamaged. He opened it carefully. An analog piece, nothing digital to malfunction. The second hand still swept forward. Time functioned. Reality remained consistent. But reality felt thin here. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in David's situation? Share your thoughts. David expanded his search in a grid pattern, marking trees with biodegradable tape every 50 feet. Professional methodology, systematic coverage, but every step felt observed. 20 minutes into the expanded search, he found Megan's jacket hung neatly over a low branch, as if she'd removed it because of exertion. Except the morning temperature was 48 degrees, not warm enough to justify shedding layers. He checked the pockets, empty except for a granola bar wrapper and a small notebook. The notebook's last entry was written in rushed handwriting, 7:02 a.m. The light here is impossible. Wrong angle for the sun. Comes from inside the tree. Must be reflection from moss. Will investigate. 7:15 a.m. Heard something. Voice. Wind through roots creates unusual acoustics. Sounds almost like words. Almost like welcome. 7:31 a.m. Getting colder. Thermometer shows 48 degrees but feels much colder near the roots. Electromagnetic interference? Camera batteries draining faster than normal. 7:44 a.m. I think I see the entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off the page. David looked at his own thermometer, 48 degrees. He approached the tree's root chambers. The temperature plummeted, his breath suddenly visible, his exposed skin prickling. His thermometer still read 48 degrees. "Megan!" he called into the largest root chamber. His voice came back wrong, not an echo but a response, the syllables rearranged into something that sounded like come. He clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight. The beam penetrated about 8 feet into the chamber before the darkness simply swallowed it. Not shadow but absence. He swept the light systematically. Moss, root structure, soil, more moss. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should stop light from traveling. David pulled out his hiking pole, extending it to full length. The chamber appeared to continue back another 20 feet, though the darkness made estimation difficult. He pushed the pole forward, the tip disappearing into shadow. Contact with something solid came at 12 feet, bark presumably. He tapped twice, solid, real. Then the tree tapped back. 3 measured knocks from deep within the chamber, distinct against his pole's aluminum. David froze. He tapped again, twice quickly. The response came after a 5-second pause. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same location. Every instinct screamed to back away. 22 years of training said otherwise. Missing person. Continue search. Protocol exists for reasons. He spoke into the darkness. "Megan, if you can hear me, I'm Ranger David Mercer. I'm here to help you. Can you respond?" The knocking came again, but different now. Rapid, irregular, like fingernails on wood. Then a sound that could have been wind or could have been breathing, deep and measured. Then nothing. David retreated 3 steps, reassessing. The rational brain cataloged possibilities, acoustic anomalies, animals in the hollow trunk, thermal inversions creating auditory illusions. The primitive brain recognized predation. He radioed again. Still nothing. Checked his phone. No signal, though it had shown 3 bars at the trailhead. His GPS unit powered on but refused to acquire satellites, spinning endlessly in search mode. Alone. Truly alone, in a way that felt deliberate. David made a decision. Mark this location, continue the grid search, return with full team and proper equipment. He tied bright orange tape to the branch where Megan's jacket hung, photographed the scene from multiple angles, and plotted the coordinates manually on his paper map. As he turned to continue the search pattern, something moved in his peripheral vision. A woman stood 60 feet away, partially obscured by a massive hemlock. She wore modern hiking clothes, the kind visible in Megan's social media photos that Dispatch had forwarded. Dark hair pulled back, athletic build. "Megan," David called, moving toward her. She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, perfectly still in a way humans rarely achieve. David covered 30 feet before his mind registered the wrongness. She cast no shadow despite the directional morning light. Her clothes appeared clean despite hours in the forest. Her stillness was absolute, not even the subtle shift of breathing. He stopped. Megan Hartley. The figure turned then, movement too smooth, and began walking deeper into the forest. Not fleeing, walking at a measured pace that suggested she expected to be followed. Every missing persons protocol said never pursue alone. Every instinct said this wasn't Megan, but the rational mind provided cover, possible hypothermia, altered mental state, need for immediate medical attention. David followed, maintaining 30 feet of distance, marking his trail with tape. The figure led him northwest, away from any established path, through increasingly dense undergrowth. Twice he called to her. Twice she failed to acknowledge him, just maintained that steady, purposeful pace. They traveled this way for 20 minutes, David's GPS still unable to acquire position, his radio still producing static. He was mentally mapping the route, uphill, following a ridgeline, crossing 2 seasonal streams, when the figure stopped. They'd reached a clearing David had never seen before, and in 22 years he'd believed he'd seen every clearing in this section of the park. A perfect circle maybe 40 feet across. The ground bare of vegetation except for a carpet of moss so uniform it looked manicured. In the center stood another Sitka spruce, smaller than the old mother but still massive, its trunk scarred by something that looked like claw marks but ran 30 feet up the bark. The figure stood at the clearing's edge, motionless. David approached carefully, every sense alert. This close, he could see her face clearly. It was Megan, exact match to her driver's license photo. But her eyes were wrong, not the color or shape but the quality of attention. She looked at David the way a blueprint looks at a building, recognizing the structure but not the substance. "Megan, I'm Ranger Mercer. Your parents are on their way. We need to get you back to the trailhead." She tilted her head, a movement too precise, too angular. When she spoke, her voice sounded like words spoken underwater, distorted and echoing. The old mother remembers. You remember. All Rangers remember. "I'm going to need you to come with me." David kept his voice level, authoritative. "You may be experiencing hypothermia. We need to get you warm." "She called me," Megan said, and this time her voice sounded more natural, more human. "The tree. She called my name. She showed me, David, she showed me everything that's ever died in this forest. Every bird, every elk, every person, they're all here, all feeding the roots. Megan, she's been here for 800 years, did you know that? The Quileute planted her, a guardian, a watcher. But we keep coming, taking pictures, taking pieces, forgetting to ask permission." David's hand moved to his radio reflexively, knowing it wouldn't work but needing the familiar weight. "We're going to walk back together, slowly. Can you do that?" Megan's expression shifted, something like sadness crossing her features. "You can't take me back. I already gave her my image. That's what cameras do, don't they? Steal pieces of soul. The old mother just kept what I offered." She raised her arm, and David saw what he'd missed in the shadows. Her forearm was wrapped in moss, not draped, but integrated, the green tendrils seeming to emerge from her skin. She noticed his gaze and looked down at it with detached curiosity. "It doesn't hurt," she said. "It feels like belonging." David's training had no protocol for this, no checkbox for victim integrated with flora. He fell back on fundamentals. Keep talking, maintain rapport, wait for opportunity. "Your parents love you very much. They're driving up right now. Your mother." He checked his notes. "Jennifer, she wants to see you." At the name, Megan flinched. For a moment, her eyes cleared. Genuinely clear, genuinely present. "Mom? Oh God, my mom!" Her voice broke with real emotion. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted the photo. The perfect photo. The light was so beautiful and she said I could. She said, who said you could?" Megan pointed at the scarred tree. "She did. The old mother. She speaks through the roots. You can hear her if you listen. She's been alone so long, David. So long protecting this place while we take and take and take. She just wanted to be seen. Really seen, not through a lens, but through understanding." The moss on Megan's arm crept visibly higher, reaching toward her shoulder. She looked down at it with resignation. "I should have asked permission first," she whispered. "The old woman told me, ask permission. But I was so excited and the light was perfect and I thought rules didn't apply to art." David made a calculation. He'd spent 22 years learning to read the forest, learning to move through it with respect rather than dominance. If there was a guardian spirit, if any of this was real beyond hypothermia and hallucination, then maybe the old protocols still mattered. He approached the scarred tree slowly, keeping his movements visible and non-threatening. At its base, he set down his pack and knelt in the moss. "I'm David Mercer," he said clearly, feeling foolish but committed. "I've served this forest for 22 years. I've walked these trails, protected these trees, educated thousands about respecting this place. I'm asking permission to bring Megan Hartley home to her family, not as a demand, as a request." Silence answered. Just wind through branches, the distant call of a jay, the creak of stressed wood. Normal forest sounds. Then the temperature plummeted. David's breath became fog. Frost formed on his jacket sleeves. The moss around him paled from vibrant green to silver white. And from the tree's root system a sound emerged. Low, resonant, ancient. Not words, but something deeper. A vibration he felt in his chest rather than heard with his ears. The clearing's perfect circle of moss began to move, rippling like water despite being solid ground. The Sitka spruce with the claw marks seemed to shift, its trunk rotating slightly to face David directly. Impossible. Trees don't move. But this one did. Branches settling into a new configuration that resembled a figure in repose. From behind the tree, a woman emerged. She wore traditional Quileute regalia, cedar bark cape, shell necklace, patterns David had seen in museum displays but never in living context. Her age was indeterminate, simultaneously young and impossibly old. She walked toward David with the measured pace of someone who had never hurried, who existed outside urgency. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere. The trees, the moss, the earth itself. 22 years you walk these paths. 22 years you stop trash burners and trail cutters and tree carvers. You teach respect. You enforce boundaries. She studied him with eyes that reflected green light. "Why should I trust you now?" David's mouth felt dry. Every rational thought screamed this wasn't real. Couldn't be real. But reality had become negotiable the moment Megan's watch stopped working while still running. "Because I'm asking," he managed. Not demanding, not taking, asking. The woman circled him slowly. The photographer took without asking, saw beauty and claimed it with her lens, believed her desire justified trespass. "She's 26 years old," David said. "She made a mistake, a human mistake. She has parents who love her, friends waiting, an entire life ahead. Please." "Lives are brief." The woman gestured at the forest. "These trees measure time in centuries. What are decades to those who count in rings of growth? Everything to those who live them." The woman stopped circling, regarding him with something that might have been approval. "You understand? Most rangers learn protocol but not purpose. You learned both. You know these woods remember. Then help them remember Megan returned safely. Help them remember mercy." For a long moment, the woman said nothing. The frost on David's jacket began to thaw. The moss stopped rippling. The temperature slowly climbed back toward normal. She looked at Megan, who stood frozen at the clearing's edge, moss now wrapped to her shoulder. "She saw," the woman said quietly. "She saw everything. All the death, all the life, all the cycles. She saw what photographs can never capture. And she offered herself to hold that seeing." "Let me take her place," David heard himself say. The woman's eyes snapped to him. "You would trade?" Every survival instinct screamed no. Every protocol violation alarm rang. But David thought of Jennifer Hartley driving north, thought of 2 decades teaching people to respect what they couldn't understand, thought of his own children who'd grown up treating these forests as sacred spaces. if that's what's required. The woman studied him for a long time. Then, incredibly, she smiled, an expression both terrible and kind. No trade required, David Mercer. Only understanding. She walked to Megan, placing a weathered hand on the moss-covered arm. The tendrils began to retreat, withdrawing into the earth as if they'd never been. Take her home. Teach her what she saw. Help her understand that some things shouldn't be captured, only witnessed. The moss fell away completely. Megan gasped, stumbling forward, suddenly freed from whatever had held her. David caught her, feeling her solid weight, her warmth, her racing pulse. Real. Alive. Human. When he looked back, the woman was gone. The clearing looked ordinary, just another gap in the canopy, already growing ferns in the morning light. But the scarred tree remained, and at its base, 7 river stones arranged in a careful semicircle. Megan was crying. I saw. God, David, I saw everything. Every moment this forest has existed. Felt it through the roots. It was beautiful and terrible and... She looked at her arm where the moss had been. The skin showed no marks, no damage, but she stared at it with haunted recognition. I took without asking. Can you walk? She nodded, tears still streaming. My cameras, all my equipment. I need to... Leave them, David said firmly. Consider it payment for a lesson learned. They walked back in silence, David following his marked trail while Megan stayed close, occasionally touching trees as if reassuring herself of their solidity. His radio crackled to life halfway back, Linda's voice cutting through static, concerned about his extended silence. His GPS suddenly acquired satellites, showing their position exactly where his mental map had predicted. Reality returned in increments, but neither of them mentioned what had happened. Not yet. Not while the forest still listened. At the trailhead, Colin ran to meet them, relief flooding his face. Megan. Jesus Christ, we thought, where were you? Got disoriented, Megan said automatically, the lie smooth. David found me about a mile off trail. Hypothermia was setting in. Colin wrapped her in a blanket from his car, already talking about the hospital, about her parents, about how worried everyone had been. Megan let herself be shepherded, but over Colin's shoulder, she met David's eyes. The look they shared held weight, acknowledgement of something witnessed together, something that would bind them in permanent silence. David filed his official report that evening. Missing hiker found disoriented due to hypothermia and possible dehydration. Abandoned equipment collected as evidence. Medical evaluation recommended, case closed. The paperwork said nothing about ancient guardians or impossible conversations or trades that were offered but not required. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at the ranger station addressed to David. Inside, he found a framed photograph, not of the old mother, but of the scarred tree in the clearing. The image was technically perfect, but somehow missed the otherworldly quality of that space. A note was attached in Megan's handwriting. Some things can't be captured, only witnessed, only remembered. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for the gift of my life. I'll never forget what I saw or what you offered. I'm teaching photography now. Lesson 1. Always ask permission. M.H. David hung the photograph in his office where it remained for the rest of his career. On quiet mornings before tourists arrived, he'd study it and remember the woman in cedar bark, the impossible cold, the moment reality became negotiable. He never returned to that clearing, couldn't find it again, though he tried once. The forest had reclaimed it, or perhaps it had never truly existed in measurable space. Some boundaries, he learned, existed between what was and what we're allowed to see. On his final day of service, 28 years after starting, David hiked the Hoh River Trail one last time. At the fork where Megan's camera bag had been found, now years grown over, he left 7 river stones arranged in a careful semicircle. No trade required, only understanding. And in the deep green silence, he thought he heard something that could have been wind, or could have been approval. The forest remembered. He remembered. That was enough. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of what really happened to Megan in those lost hours? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. The radio crackled at 6:47 a.m., pulling James from his third cup of coffee. Outside the ranger station window, fog clung to the Sitka spruce like something that had forgotten how to let go. Dispatch to Ranger Caldwell. We have a report of a missing hiker, 24-year-old female, last seen yesterday afternoon on the Hummingbird Ridge Trail. Family called it in an hour ago. James set down his mug, the ceramic making a flat sound against the wooden desk. 14 years with the National Park Service had taught him that the first hours mattered most. The Olympic wilderness didn't care about experience or preparation. It simply was, indifferent and vast. Copy that. What's our last known position? Mile marker 7 near the junction with Elk Creek. She was solo hiking, planned to camp at Thistle Meadow and return Sunday evening. Didn't show up for work Monday morning. He pulled on his pack, checking the GPS unit, a Garmin eTrex 30 with fresh batteries. His phone showed 2 bars which would disappear within a mile of the trailhead. Standard for this sector. The topographic map went into the chest pocket of his green jacket, laminated and annotated with his own pencil marks from hundreds of patrols. Hiker's name? Emily Voss. Reddish-brown hair, 5'6", last seen wearing a blue North Face jacket and gray hiking pants. Her car is still at the Hummingbird Trailhead parking lot. James knew that lot. Gravel and dirt, room for maybe 8 vehicles, accessible only by a logging road that turned to mud when it rained, which it had, all night. I'm en route, ETA 20 minutes. He grabbed the SAR pack from the equipment locker, emergency blanket, first aid kit, energy bars, water purification tablets, rope. His personal radio went on his belt next to the bear spray. Before leaving, he sent a text to his wife Sarah. Got a call. Missing hiker. Should be back for dinner. Tell Maddie I'll help with her science project tonight. His daughter's middle school assignment on forest ecosystems. She'd been excited about it all week. The drive to the trailhead took him through old-growth forest where the trees stood like cathedral columns, their tops disappearing into gray morning sky. The Dodge Ram's tires carved fresh tracks through mud on Forest Road 2918. When he reached the lot, a silver Honda Accord sat alone, rain-beaded and waiting. James radioed his position and started up the trail. The Hummingbird Ridge Trail climbed 2,400 feet over 8 miles, threading through western hemlock and Douglas fir. James moved at a steady pace, eyes scanning for any sign. Disturbed vegetation, dropped equipment, footprints in soft earth. The rain had complicated things. Fresh mud covered older tracks and water dripped from every branch, creating a constant patter that made listening difficult. He called out every few minutes, Emily Voss. This is the Park Service." Only forest sounds answered. A raven's croak, wind moving through high branches, water running somewhere below the trail. At mile marker 4, he found the first sign. A granola bar wrapper wedged between 2 rocks. Cliff Bar, chocolate chip. He photographed it with his digital camera, a Canon PowerShot Park issued, and bagged it, fresh enough that rain hadn't degraded the paper. The trail steepened. His calves burned with familiar effort, and he controlled his breathing the way he'd learned over thousands of miles in these mountains. At elevation, 3,200 feet, the forest changed. The trees thinned, and visibility improved. Patches of fog drifted through clearings like things with purpose. Emily. This time, something answered, not words exactly. A sound that could have been a voice, distant and distorted by terrain. James stopped, head cocked. Sound traveled strangely in the Olympics. Valleys amplified. Ridges confused direction. He'd heard echoes of his own voice come back sounding like someone else. He waited. The forest settled into its rhythms. Emily Voss. If you can hear me, stay where you are. Help is here. The response came faster this time. Definitely a voice. Definitely calling back, but the words were unclear, smudged by distance and atmosphere. James checked his GPS. Mile 6.2. The Elk Creek Junction was another quarter-mile ahead. He picked up his pace, pulse elevated now, not from exertion, but from the possibility of finding her alive and responsive. The junction appeared around a switchback, a wooden sign weathered gray, arrows pointing to 3 different trails. And there, at the base of the sign, was a tent, blue and orange, partially collapsed on one side. "Emily!" He approached carefully, noting details. The tent's rain fly hung loose. The zipper was open. Inside, a sleeping bag, still in its stuff sack, a backpack, not properly secured, water bottle, headlamp, but no Emily. James keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I've located camping equipment at the Elk Creek Junction. Solo tent appears abandoned. No sign of the hiker." "Copy that, Ranger Caldwell. State search and rescue is mobilizing. ETA 2 hours." 2 hours. He examined the campsite more carefully. The ground around the tent showed disturbance, footprints leading away into the underbrush, off-trail. Not running, walking, purposeful. He followed them. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in James's situation? Share your thoughts. The prints led west, toward a drainage that wasn't on any official trail. James moved slowly, marking his route with orange flagging tape tied to branches every 30 yards. SAR protocol. Don't become the second victim. The forest here felt different. Older. The trees grew massive, their trunks 10 feet across, bark thick with moss. Nurse logs, fallen giants slowly decomposing, sprouted new growth from their backs. Everything was green and brown and gray, colors bleeding into each other in the mist. Emily. James. He froze. That was his name, clear as anything. A woman's voice, but not Emily's voice. Unless he'd never heard Emily speak, so how would he know? "Emily, is that you?" "James, help me." The direction was wrong. The voice came from upslope, but the footprints led down. He stood at the junction of conflicting information, radio in hand, trying to make sense of it. "Where are you?" "I'm scared, Daddy." Every muscle in James's body locked. That was Maddie's voice, his 12-year-old daughter's voice, pitched high with fear, coming from somewhere in the fog-wrapped forest. "Maddie?" Impossible. She was at school in Port Angeles, 43 miles away. He'd dropped her off himself yesterday morning. Watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing. She was fine. She was safe. "Daddy, please." His hand went to his phone. No service. Not even a single bar. He was alone at 3,800 feet elevation with something that sounded like his daughter calling for help from a forest where she couldn't possibly be. Training fought instinct. James forced himself to breathe. Count to 10. Assess. Sound distortion. Had to be. Maybe hikers on another trail, voices carrying strange. Maybe his mind playing tricks after hours of calling out, expecting responses. The brain did that, filled in patterns, created meaning from noise. But it sounded exactly like Maddie. He consulted the map. The drainage below led eventually to Elk Creek proper. The slope above climbed toward Hummingbird Ridge's summit. Standard search protocol said follow the evidence, the footprints, not phantom sounds. "Daddy, I can't find you." James made a decision. He pulled out his notebook and wrote quickly. "Heard voices. Sounded like my daughter." Investigating upslope. 11:34 a.m. He photographed the note with his camera, time-stamped. Then he marked the location carefully with multiple strips of flagging tape and started climbing toward the voice. The slope was steep. No trail, just game paths through Salal and Oregon grape. His boots found purchase on root systems. Twice he used his hands to pull himself up. "Where are you?" he called. "Here. I'm here." Always ahead, always just out of sight. The fog thickened as he climbed, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. Trees emerged from white and disappeared back into it. James kept checking his compass, maintaining his bearing. fighting the disorientation that came with climbing through featureless mist. At 4,100 feet, the forest opened into a small clearing, and there, sitting on a fallen log with her back to him, was a figure in a blue jacket. Emily? The figure didn't turn, didn't move, just sat there, shoulders rising and falling with breath. James approached slowly. Emily Voss? I'm Ranger James Caldwell. Your family reported you missing. Are you injured? No response. He circled around the log to see her face. The blue jacket was there, the gray pants. But the face, it wasn't Emily. It wasn't anyone. The features were wrong, blurred, like looking at someone through frosted glass. And the eyes, when they turned toward him, were completely black. James stepped back, hand going to his radio. The thing stood, smiled with a mouth that had too many teeth. James, it said in Maddie's voice, why did you leave me? He ran. No thought, just pure animal response to wrongness. James crashed through underbrush, branches whipping his face, radio bouncing on his belt. Behind him, something moved through the forest with a sound like wind through hollow trees. His boot caught a root. He went down hard, hands breaking his fall, pain shooting through his left wrist. The radio jarred loose, tumbling into ferns. James scrambled for it, fingers closing around plastic. Static hissed. He keyed the transmit button. Dispatch, this is Ranger Caldwell. I need immediate. The radio died, completely dead. Digital display blank. Fresh batteries that morning, and now nothing. A branch cracked behind him. He looked back. The figure in the blue jacket stood 30 feet away, perfectly still, head cocked at an angle no human neck should manage. You can't leave, it said. Still Maddie's voice. Still exactly right, except for being completely wrong. Nobody leaves. James forced himself to think past fear. Whatever this was, hallucination, mental break, something else entirely. He needed answers, and more importantly, he needed to find Emily. What did you do to her? His voice came out steady, ranger voice, authority voice. The thing laughed. The sound echoed from multiple directions at once, as if the forest itself was laughing. She listened. She followed. She's with us now. With who? The ones who were here first. The ones who stayed when everyone else left. It took a step forward. James stood his ground. This is Olympic National Park, federal land. I'm a federal officer, and you need to... Names. The voice changed, dropped Maddie's pitch, became something older. You give this place names, draw lines on paper, but it doesn't care about your names. It remembers what it was before you came with your trails and signs and rules. Another step closer. James could see details now. The jacket wasn't quite right. Stitching in wrong places, pockets that opened onto nothing. And beneath the collar, where skin should be, there was only darkness. What are you? Hungry. It moved fast. Impossibly fast. One moment 30 feet away, the next it was on him, hands cold as river water grabbing his jacket. The smell hit him. Decay and ozone and something sweet and wrong. James brought the bear spray up, thumbed the safety, pressed the trigger. Orange mist filled the air between them. The thing shrieked, released him, staggered back, clawing at its face, or the approximation of a face. The spray, designed for a bear's mucous membranes, seemed to have some effect. The figure wavered, like a bad television signal, flickering between solid and something else. James didn't wait. He grabbed his radio and ran downslope using gravity, letting momentum carry him through the forest. Branches tore at him. His boots skidded on wet earth. He didn't care. He just ran. The forest changed around him, impossibly fast, or maybe he'd been turned around. The trees looked different. Wrong. Too many. Too close together. As if the forest was denser than it should be. More forest than could fit in the space. A voice called from his left. James, honey, where are you? Sarah, his wife. From the right. Daddy. Maddie again. Ahead, Help me, please. A young woman. Emily. All around him, voices called from the fog. Familiar, impossible, each one pulling at him, trying to make him stop, turn around, follow deeper into trees that had no end. James kept his eyes on his compass, kept moving downhill. Elevation was objective. Physics didn't lie, even when everything else did. At 3,600 feet, the voices stopped. At 3,400 feet, the forest looked normal again. Real trees, real spacing, real world. At 3,200 feet, his radio crackled to life. Caldwell, respond. Ranger Caldwell, do you copy? He keyed the transmit button with shaking hands. This is Caldwell. I copy. Jesus, James, where have you been? We lost your signal for 40 minutes. Say our team is en route to your last known position. 40 minutes. He checked his watch. 1:17 p.m. The last time he'd checked was, he tried to remember. Before the figure, before the voices. 11:34. Nearly 2 hours. Gone. Just gone. I found evidence at Elk Creek Junction, he said, voice flat. Following tracks. Need to continue search. Negative. Return to the junction. The team will take it from there. James looked upslope, toward the ridge where he'd been, where he'd seen what he'd seen, where Emily might still be. If she was still Emily, if she was still anything. Copy that, returning to junction. He made his way back carefully, following his own flagging tape. Each strip of orange plastic was exactly where he'd left it, except there were more of them. Between his markers, someone had tied additional strips. Dozens of them, leading off trail in different directions, creating a maze of false paths. James photographed them all. Evidence. Proof. Something. At the junction, the tent was still there, but something had changed. Inside the collapsed structure, arranged carefully on top of the sleeping bag, was a small pile of personal items. A wallet with Emily Voss's ID, a phone with a cracked screen, a silver bracelet, and a ranger's badge, green and gold, official National Park Service issue. The name engraved on it read, James Caldwell. The SAR team arrived at 2:30 p.m., 6 people in orange vests with packs and equipment and professional competence. Their team leader, a woman named Torres, shook James's hand and asked for his report. He told them about the footprints, the abandoned camp, the items in the tent. He did not tell them about the voices, about the thing in the blue jacket, about his own badge lying next to Emily's possessions like an accusation. Torres examined the tent carefully. You touched anything? No. I photographed and marked the site. Good work. She turned to her team. Miller, Fletcher, you two sweep west along Elk Creek. Harrison, Patel, take the summit trail. Johnson and I will work the drainage south. Standard search pattern, radio check every 15 minutes. We're looking for a 24-year-old female, possibly injured, possibly disoriented. Anyone gets a bad feeling about a situation, you call it in. Nobody goes off trail alone. The team dispersed. Torres looked at James. You okay? You look like you've been through it. Long morning. Get some water, eat something. You did good finding the camp. James nodded, but his eyes went to the tent. The badge was gone. He'd seen it, photographed it. But when Torres inventoried the items she'd listed, wallet, phone, bracelet, nothing else. He checked his camera, scrolled through the images, footprints, granola wrapper, tent exterior, tent interior, items on sleeping bag, wallet, phone, bracelet, no badge. His hands started shaking. He sat on a rock and drank water and tried to make the world make sense again. The radio chatter continued through the afternoon. The teams called in their positions. Clear here, nothing here, no sign. The day wore on, and the October light began to fail early, filtered through fog and forest. At 4:47 p.m., Miller's voice came through, tense. Team leader, this is Miller. I've got something. West drainage, approximately quarter-mile from junction. You need to see this. Torres and James hiked quickly to Miller's position. The Ranger stood next to a massive western red cedar, its trunk 20 feet around, ancient beyond reckoning. At its base, carved into the bark with something sharp, were words. She listened. She followed. She stays below that, scratched in smaller letters. They want more. Torres photographed the carvings. Recent? Can't tell. Maybe hours, maybe days. But look at this. Miller pointed to the ground at the tree's base. Footprints, fresh, leading around the trunk and then stopping. Just stopping, as if whoever made them had simply ceased to exist. Fan out, Torres ordered. 30-foot radius. Carefully. The team searched in expanding circles. James stayed near the cedar, studying the carvings. The letters were crude, irregular, carved by someone in distress, or by something pretending to be someone in distress. Fletcher called out, "Got clothes here. Blue jacket, gray pants, North Face brand." They converged on the location. The clothes lay folded neatly on a flat rock, as if someone had undressed carefully and arranged their outfit for the next day. Emily's wallet was tucked in the jacket pocket, her phone in the pants, but no Emily. Torres's face was grim. This just got complicated. Johnson, call it in. We need the FBI. We need dogs. We need... The scream cut her off. High-pitched, terrified, coming from everywhere and nowhere. It lasted 5 seconds, then silence so complete that James could hear his own pulse in his ears. Who was that? Torres had her radio out. Sound off. Miller? Here. Fletcher? Here. Harrison? Here. Patel? Static. Patel, respond. More static. Torres looked at Harrison. Where's your partner? He was right behind me. We were both on the summit trail, heading back. He was right behind me. The team regrouped quickly, military precision overriding fear. 7 people were now 6. Emily was missing, and now Patel. Torres made a decision. We're pulling out, now. Everyone stays together. Johnson, you've got point. James, you bring up rear. We move fast, we move quiet, and we do not separate for any reason. Clear? Clear. They started back toward the junction, moving in tight formation. The forest around them had gone quiet. No wind, no birds. Just boots on dirt and breathing, and the occasional crackle of radio static. Halfway back, James heard it again. Daddy. He didn't stop walking, didn't respond, kept his eyes on Fletcher's back ahead of him. James, why won't you help me? Torres glanced back. You hear that? Yeah. Your daughter? My daughter's in school, 43 miles from here. Right. Torres's hand went to her sidearm, a Glock 22, standard Park Service issue. Everybody keep moving. The voice followed them. Sometimes Maddie, sometimes Sarah. Once, his father, who'd been dead for 6 years. The team didn't speak about it. They just walked faster. At the junction, something was different. The tent was gone. The parking area markers James had left. Gone. Even his flagging tape had disappeared from the trees. This is the spot, James said. I marked it. The tent was right here. Torres swept her flashlight across the area. The beam caught something white hanging from a branch. She approached carefully. It was a note, written on National Park Service letterhead in blocky handwriting. Found them, all of them, their home, now don't come back. Below the message, a list of names. James recognized them immediately. Names from the park's cold case files. Hikers who disappeared over the years. 7 people across 23 years. And at the bottom, in fresh ink, Emily Voss. Ranger Dev Patel. Torres photographed the note. Her hand trembled slightly. We're leaving. Radio for helicopter extraction. We're not walking out. Johnson tried his radio. Static. Tried his cell phone. No service. Tried the satellite phone from his pack. Dead batteries, despite being freshly charged that morning. Radios? Torres asked. Everyone checked. Every radio in the team showed 0 battery. Impossible. Statistically impossible. Then we walk, Torres said. Fast. They made it half a mile before the trail disappeared. Not gradually, not subtly. One moment they were on the Hummingbird Ridge Trail, clear, well-maintained, marked, and the next they were standing in virgin forest with no path in any direction. Miller checked his GPS. This doesn't make sense. The unit shows us on the trail, right here. But there's no trail. James looked at his own GPS. Same reading. They were exactly where they should be, except they weren't. Compass bearing, Torres ordered. We head northwest. That's out. That's civilization. We don't need a trail. They pushed through underbrush, using the compasses, maintaining their bearing. The forest fought them. Salal thick as walls, fallen logs blocking progress, terrain that seemed to shift when they weren't looking. After an hour, they emerged into a clearing, the Elk Creek Junction, the same one they'd left. No, Fletcher said. No way. We walked northwest for an hour, straight line. Torres checked her compass, checked her map. Her face showed the moment she stopped trusting instruments and started trusting her gut. Something was very wrong. We try again, different direction, south. The ridge is south. They walked south for 45 minutes, emerged into the same clearing. It's not letting us leave, Harrison said quietly. Torres rounded on him. It? What it? There's no it. There's terrain and weather and disorientation, that's all. But her voice lacked conviction. James saw it in her eyes. She'd heard the voices too, seen the equipment fail, watched the trail vanish. She was holding on to rational explanation like a drowning person holding driftwood, and the water was rising. We camp here, she said. Wait for daylight. Sar will be looking for us by now. We have supplies. We have training. We wait. They set up a defensive position in the clearing, backs to the massive cedar, good sight lines in all directions. Built no fire, ate energy bars and drank water and took shifts on watch. James took the midnight to 2 shift. The forest around him was alive with sounds that weren't quite right. Movement that stopped when he turned his head. Breathing that didn't match the rhythm of his team. At 1:23 a.m. he saw the lights, flashlights, dozens of them, moving through the trees in the distance. A search party. Help. He stood, ready to call out. Then stopped. The lights were moving wrong. Not in a search pattern. All together, in a line, walking in perfect unison. And they were coming from upslope, from the direction of the ridge, from the place where people disappeared. James woke Torres silently, pointed. She watched the lights approach, counted them. 14 distinct sources. That's not SAR, she whispered. The lights drew closer. James could make out figures now, silhouettes backlit by their own beams. They moved without sound, without hesitation, directly toward the clearing. Wake everyone, Torres hissed. Quietly. The team roused, saw the lights, understood without being told that this was not rescue. They pressed backs against the cedar, weapons drawn, bear spray, knives, Torres's Glock. The lights reached the clearing's edge and stopped. All 14 in a perfect semicircle facing the team. Silence. Then, in perfect unison, every light went out. Total darkness. James's eyes strained against it, useless. He could hear his team breathing, could hear his own pulse, could hear, very faintly, something else breathing in the darkness ahead. A flashlight clicked on. Torres's beam. It swept across the clearing. Empty. Nothing there. The forest looked completely normal. What the? Miller started. The scream came from directly behind them. They spun. The cedar tree's bark had changed. The wood was moving, rippling like water, and emerging from it were faces. Human faces pressed against the inside of the bark as if trapped behind glass. Mouths open, eyes wide, silent screaming. James recognized them from the photographs in the cold case files. The missing hikers. All 7. preserved somehow in the living wood, and there, freshest, still pressing outward as if she'd just arrived, Emily Voss. Next to her, also fresh, Ranger Dev Patel, and beside them, beginning to press through, a new face. James recognized the brown hair, the green eyes, the mole near the chin. His own face, looking back at him from inside the tree. "Run!" Torres screamed. They scattered, protocol broken, formation abandoned, pure survival instinct sending each person in a different direction into the dark forest. James ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs went numb and his mind emptied of everything except the need for distance. Branches whipped past. Roots tried to trip him. The forest became a blur of shadow and occasional moonlight filtered through fog. When he finally stopped, gasping, hands on knees, he had no idea where he was. No GPS, no compass, no team, just forest in every direction. He was lost, completely, utterly lost. James found the trail at dawn, not the Hummingbird Ridge Trail. A different trail, narrower, older, marked with weathered wooden signs he didn't recognize, but it was going downhill and down meant out, so he followed it. The forest looked normal in daylight. Birds sang, squirrels chattered, sun filtered through branches in golden shafts. The nightmare of the previous night seemed impossible, except his radio was still dead. His GPS still showed him in impossible locations, and when he checked his camera, the last photo, the one of the note at the junction, showed something different than he remembered. The list of names was longer, much longer, dozens of names, small text covering the entire page. And at the very bottom, added in fresh ink, Ranger Maria Torres, Ranger David Miller, Ranger Sarah Fletcher, Ranger Tom Harrison, Ranger Mike Johnson, his entire team. James stopped walking, looked around. The trail stretched ahead of him, inviting, clear, leading down, leading out, leading nowhere. He knew with absolute certainty that if he followed this trail, he'd end up back at the clearing, back at the cedar, back at the beginning. The forest wasn't letting him leave, but there had to be a way. Emily had left a message. They want more. Not at once. They. Multiple entities, a collective, and collectives could be negotiated with. James thought about the voices. His daughter, his wife, his father, each one perfectly calibrated to pull him deeper, make him follow, make him listen. But there was something the voices had said. The thing in Emily's jacket. The ones who were here first, the ones who stayed when everyone else left. This land had been inhabited for thousands of years before the Park Service existed. The Quileute, the Quinault, the Maca. They'd had their own names for these mountains, their own relationships with the forests. James didn't know those names, didn't know the stories, didn't know the proper respect. But he knew someone who did. His phone had no service, but it had pictures, videos. Maddie's science project folder. She'd been researching Olympic Peninsula indigenous history, had recorded interviews with elders, had compiled stories about the forests. He pulled up the videos, found one titled Forest Spirits, Joseph Black Eagle, pressed play. The old man's face appeared on the small screen, wrinkled and kind. His voice was soft but clear. Our people understood that the forest is not empty. It is full. Full of life, yes, but also full of others. Spirits who were here before the trees, before the mountains. They are not evil, not good, just old, and hungry for what they've lost. The recognition, the offerings, the acknowledgement that they exist. The video continued. Joseph Black Eagle described rituals, specific words, specific gestures, ways to move through the forest that showed respect rather than dominance. James watched the entire thing, 15 minutes, then watched it again. At the end, the old man looked directly into the camera, directly at James across time and digital space, and said, "If you find yourself truly lost in the Olympics, remember, you are a guest. Act like one." The video ended. James stood in the middle of the trail and spoke out loud. "I'm sorry. We came here with our maps and our names and our rules, and we didn't ask permission. We didn't show respect. I'm sorry. The forest was silent. I'm just trying to get home. To my family. To my daughter who's learning about this place, trying to understand it better than I have. I'm not trying to take anything, I'm just trying to leave. Nothing. James thought about offerings. He had energy bars, water, equipment. None of it felt right. Then he remembered the badge. His ranger badge, still pinned to his jacket. He unpinned it, held it in his palm. 14 years of service. His identity in this place, his authority. This is all I have that means anything. It's yours if you want it, I just need to leave. Please. He set the badge on a flat rock beside the trail, stepped back, waited. The forest held its breath. Then, very gently, a breeze stirred. The kind of breeze that had direction and purpose. It moved past James, carrying the scent of cedar and earth and rain, and it felt like acknowledgement. He turned and walked down the trail. Didn't look back. Didn't hurry. Just walked with steady purpose, guessed in someone else's home, heading toward the door. The trail stayed solid beneath his feet. The trees stayed trees. The forest stayed forest. After 2 hours, he saw the parking lot. His truck, still there. Emily's Honda Accord beside it. Real. Actual. True. James walked to his truck, got in, started the engine. It caught immediately. The radio played country music. His phone showed 4 bars of service. He drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The official report listed 7 people missing. Emily Voss, Ranger Dev Patel, Ranger Maria Torres, Ranger David Miller, Ranger Sarah Fletcher, Ranger Tom Harrison, and Ranger Mike Johnson. The only survivor was Ranger James Caldwell, who was found walking down Highway 101 at 3:47 p.m. on October 14, 2015, 26 miles from the Hummingbird Ridge trailhead. He was dehydrated, exhausted, but physically unharmed. His story made no sense. Search teams found no evidence of the cedar tree with faces, no note with names, no abandoned camping equipment. The trail cameras on the Hummingbird Ridge showed Emily Voss hiking up on October 12th, alone. They showed her hiking back down on October 13th, leaving the park. Her car was found in Portland, Oregon 3 days later. She'd driven home, called in sick to work, was alive and confused about why anyone thought she was missing. Ranger Dev Patel was found safe at home. He'd called in sick on October 14th, never went on the SAR mission. The rest of Torres's team, they'd all been assigned to different sectors. No SAR operation had been authorized for Olympic National Park that day. The official conclusion: Ranger James Caldwell experienced a severe mental health episode triggered by stress and isolation. Recommended treatment, mandatory leave, psychiatric evaluation. James didn't argue. He took the leave, saw the therapist, took the medication, told Sarah everything, then nothing, then something in between. She believed what she needed to believe. Maddie asked him about her science project one evening 2 weeks after the incident. They sat in the living room, her laptop open to research notes. "Dad, did you know that the Quileute people have stories about people who go into the forest and come back changed? Like, they look the same, but they're not really them anymore?" James looked at his daughter, 12 years old, smart, curious, alive. "I didn't know that," he said. "It's really interesting. The elders say that the forest needs to, I don't know, renew itself. And sometimes it takes people to do that. But it also gives people back, if they show respect." She paused. "Do you think that's true?" "I think," James said carefully, "that there are things in this world we don't understand. And sometimes the best we can do is be respectful and hope that's enough." Maddie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her research. James watched her type. Safe in their home, the forest 43 miles away. He thought about his badge, left on a rock beside a trail that might not exist. Thought about faces in tree bark. Thought about the voices that had called him deeper. He thought about Emily Voss, alive in Portland with no memory of being lost. about Ranger Patel safe at home, about the team that had never been there. Had any of it happened? His camera held photographs. But photographs could be faked. Memories could be false. The mind could create elaborate narratives to explain stress and fear and isolation. Or the forest had shown him mercy, had taken his offering and let him go, had rearranged reality to give everyone back, to undo the taking, to restore balance. James didn't know which was true. What he knew was this: he would never go back to Olympic National Park, would never work as a ranger again, would stay close to his family and his home and the things he could touch and verify and trust. The forest had what it wanted. He had what he needed. The exchange was complete. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of what really happened to James and Emily? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. The radio crackled to life at 6:47 a.m., pulling Matt from his second cup of coffee. The voice on the other end belonged to Karen, dispatch, and she sounded different than usual, tighter, more careful with her words. Matt, we've got a situation. 22-year-old female Emily Hartwell failed to return from a solo hike yesterday. Ranger station at Salt Duke got the call from her roommate about 20 minutes ago. Last known location was the Lover's Lane Trail, headed toward the Upper Falls. Matt set down his mug, already mentally cataloging his gear. Time of last contact? She texted her roommate at 3:15 p.m. yesterday, said she was turning back because of weather. Never made it to her car. 15 hours. Not good, but not hopeless. Matt had brought people back after longer. I'm 40 minutes out. Get someone to interview the roommate. I need to know everything Emily was carrying, her experience level, medical conditions, the works. Already done. I'm sending you the file now. Matt grabbed his phone as the email arrived, scanning while he pulled on his uniform jacket. Emily Hartwell, graduate student in environmental science, experienced day hiker but new to the Olympic Peninsula. Carried a blue Osprey day pack, wore a red North Face jacket. Asthmatic. Inhaler in pack. Phone battery likely dead by now. He thought of his daughter, Claire, who'd be getting ready for school right now. 13 years old and already talking about solo hiking trips she wanted to take when she was older. He'd have to talk to her about that again. Later, after he brought Emily home. The drive to the Salt Duke trailhead took 37 minutes. Matt used every one of them to study the topographical maps on his tablet, committing the terrain to memory. Lover's Lane Trail wasn't particularly challenging. A moderate 5-mile loop that followed the Salt Duke River before climbing through old-growth forest toward a series of waterfalls. Popular with tourists during summer, nearly empty by mid-October. The parking lot held only Emily's vehicle, a silver Honda Civic with a University of Washington parking permit. Matt photographed the car, noted the locked doors, peered through the windows. A calculus textbook on the passenger seat. Reusable water bottle in the cup holder. Normal things that made Emily Hartwell real, not just a name on a missing persons report. He shouldered his pack. 35 pounds of gear, including extra food, emergency blanket, first aid kit, rope, headlamp, GPS, and enough supplies to stay out for 48 hours if needed. His handheld radio went on his belt, spare batteries in his chest pocket. The Garmin GPS already had Emily's last known coordinates loaded. 6:47 a.m. Sunrise bleeding weak light through the dense canopy of Douglas fir and western hemlock. Temperature hovering at 42 degrees, going to drop tonight. Weather forecast called for possible rain by evening. Matt started up the trail at a ground-eating pace he could maintain for hours. His boots, broken in a solo TPS 520s, found purchase on the damp earth without thought. The forest smelled of decay and growth in equal measure. Decomposing cedar, sword ferns, the mineral tang of river water. He'd worked this park for 11 years, knew its rhythms like he knew his wife Sarah's breathing patterns during sleep. The first 2 miles showed nothing unusual. Trail markers intact, no signs of disturbance. He called out every few minutes, Emily Hartwell, Forest Service." his voice absorbed quickly by the vegetation, as if the forest didn't want it to carry. At the 3-mile mark where the trail forked, left toward the falls, right toward the old lookout tower, Matt found the first anomaly. A protein bar wrapper, Cliff Bar, peanut butter flavor, caught on a salal bush about 10 feet off the trail to the right. The wrapper was dry despite yesterday's rain, meaning it had been deposited recently, possibly this morning, but the old lookout tower trail had been closed for 2 years, ever since that section of hillside had started showing signs of instability. Orange warning signs, faded but legible, marked the closure. Matt keyed his radio. "Karen, what did the roommate say about Emily's planned route?" Static then. "She was doing the standard loop, out and back, hitting the upper falls." "Copy that." He photographed the wrapper, logged the coordinates. Then, against procedure that said stick to the last known route, he turned right toward the closed trail. The abandoned path showed more recent disturbance than it should, branches broken at heights consistent with someone pushing through. A partial boot print in a muddy depression, women's size 7 or 8, tread pattern matching the Merrill Moabs that Emily's roommate had described. Matt's radio crackled. He pulled it from his belt but heard only white noise, shot through with something that might have been words or might have been branches scraping in wind. He checked the battery, full charge. Signal strength fluctuated wildly, though he was on high enough ground for decent coverage. "Karen, you there?" Nothing. Then faintly what sounded like Matt. But the voice was wrong. Too high, too young. Claire's voice. Matt's hand tightened on the radio. Claire was in school 40 miles away in Port Angeles. No way she was on this frequency. He keyed the transmit button. "Repeat last transmission." Only static. He shook it off, radio interference, common enough in these valleys, and continued up the trail. The morning light, already weak under the canopy, seemed to grow dimmer despite the climbing sun. The temperature dropped perceptibly, his breath now visible in small clouds. If this story is holding your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Matt's situation? Share your thoughts. 200 yards further, Matt found Emily's inhaler. It lay in the middle of the trail, purple plastic bright against the dark soil. Matt crouched, careful not to touch it yet, studying the ground. Scuff marks in the dirt, suggesting a stumble or a fall. No blood, no signs of struggle. He bagged the inhaler, marked the location. An asthmatic wouldn't willingly separate from her inhaler. Either she dropped it without noticing, unlikely given how carefully people with chronic conditions tracked their medication, or something had happened quickly enough that she couldn't retrieve it. Matt straightened, about to radio this in when he heard it. Singing. Faint, barely audible over the wind in the trees, a woman's voice carrying a melody he didn't recognize. The sound came from upslope, deeper into the restricted area. Matt's pulse quickened. "Emily! Emily Hartwell!" The singing stopped. "Emily, this is Ranger Matt Cooper with the Forest Service. If you can hear me, call out." Silence. Then so quietly he almost missed it. "Help!" Matt was moving before conscious thought caught up, climbing the deteriorating trail with controlled urgency. The slope steepened, loose rocks skittering under his boots. He grabbed at exposed roots for handholds, pulled himself up a section where the trail had washed away entirely. "Keep talking, Emily. Follow my voice." "Help me!" Clearer now, coming from maybe 50 yards ahead. Female, young, frightened. I can't find the way down." "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." The forest opened into a small clearing. Matt didn't remember from any map. A bowl of earth surrounded by ancient cedars, their trunks wider than his arm span. In the center stood the remnants of the old fire lookout tower, mostly collapsed, support beams jutting like broken bones through the understory. No sign of Emily. "Emily? Over here." The voice came from his left, but when Matt turned, he saw only trees and shadows. He pulled out his flashlight, swept the beam across the clearing. Nothing. "Where? I can't see you." "Here, please, I'm so cold." Behind him now. Matt spun, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The beam caught something red, a flash of color between two cedars. Emily's jacket. He started toward it. His boot came down on nothing. Matt's stomach lurched as he stumbled, barely catching himself on a low-hanging branch. He'd nearly walked straight into what locals called a timber well, a vertical shaft created when an ancient tree rotted from the inside out, leaving a hole that could drop 15 feet straight down into darkness. The forest floor here was riddled with them, invisible under layers of moss and fern. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd almost... Matt. His wife's voice. Sarah's voice, unmistakable, coming from the timber well he'd nearly fallen into. "Matt, where are you? Claire's asking for you. We're waiting. Come home." Matt's hands shook as he backed away from the hole. Sarah was at work. Claire was at school. He knew this. Knew it with the certainty he knew his own name, but the voice, it was perfect. The slight hoarseness Sarah always had in the morning, the way she softened his name in the middle. "You're not real." He said it aloud, needed to hear himself say it. "We miss you." Still Sarah's voice, but now it came from 3 different directions at once. "You should come down. It's warmer down here. Safer." Matt keyed his radio with numb fingers. Karen, do you copy?" "Add. Interference." The response broke up, reformed. "Your Lover's Lane Trail, approximately 3.4 miles from Trailhead Old Lookout area, experiencing auditory anomalies, possible head injury, requesting immediate backup." Even as he said it, he knew how it sounded. Auditory anomalies. The clinical term for "I'm hearing voices." He checked himself quickly. No pain, no dizziness, his pupils equal when he flicked the flashlight across his own vision using his phone camera. No signs of concussion. The voices had stopped. The forest had gone completely silent. No bird calls, no wind, nothing. The kind of silence that preceded predators. Matt pulled out his GPS. The screen flickered, coordinates jumping erratically. 1 second it showed him at the lookout clearing, the next it placed him 2 miles south, then east, then coordinates that didn't exist within the park boundaries. He powered it off, counted to 10, powered it back on. Same erratic behavior. Standard compass then. He pulled it from his chest pocket, watched the needle spin lazily, refusing to settle on magnetic north. The liquid inside the housing seemed to have developed air bubbles that shouldn't be there, interfering with the needle's movement. 3 navigation tools all failing simultaneously. Add in the radio interference and the voices, and Matt's training suggested several possibilities, none of them good. Natural gas seepage could cause hallucinations and equipment malfunction, but he'd smell it, and the Olympic Peninsula wasn't known for gas deposits. Unusual electromagnetic phenomena, though that was outside his expertise. Or he was losing his mind. No, focus on what he could control. Emily was out here somewhere, real and in trouble. The inhaler proved that. Matt pulled out his phone, hoping for even a single bar of service. Nothing, but the camera still worked. He began documenting everything. The clearing, the timber well, the way the light fell wrong here, too dim for 9 a.m. A branch cracked behind him. Matt turned, hand dropping to the bear spray on his belt. A figure stood at the tree line. Female, red jacket, facing away from him. "Emily." The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge him, just stood there, posture wrong somehow, weight distributed in a way that suggested she wasn't fully conscious, wasn't fully present. Matt approached carefully, staying alert for more timber wells. "Emily, it's Ranger Cooper. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." 20 feet away. 15. He could see her dark hair, matted and tangled. See her hands hanging at her sides, fingers curved unnaturally. 10 feet. "Emily, can you hear me?" The figure's head tilted just slightly, in a way that made Matt's training scream at him to stop, to not get any closer. But he'd come to bring Emily home. He thought of Claire, imagined some other ranger finding his daughter like this. 5 feet. He reached out. "Emily." She turned, The face wasn't Emily's, wasn't anyone's. The features were there, but wrong, proportions subtly off in ways that screamed wrongness directly into the primitive parts of Matt's brain. The eyes focused on him, and he saw nothing behind them. Not malice, not hunger, just emptiness, vast and patient. The thing wearing Emily's jacket smiled with too many teeth. Matt stumbled backward, his heel catching on a root. He went down hard, pack slamming into his spine. The figure took a step toward him, movement jerky like a marionette with tangled strings. His hand found the bear spray, yanked it free, finger on the trigger. The figure was gone. Simply gone. Between one blink and the next. Matt scrambled to his feet, chest heaving, bear spray extended. The clearing was empty except for the ruins and the trees and the wrong silence. His radio erupted with sound. Ooper, Erku, Espan. Matt grabbed it. I'm here. Einl call ran. Cooper, if you respond, we're search and rescue. I can hear you. Karen, I'm at the old lookout. I found Emily's inhaler, but... He paused, trying to figure out how to explain what he'd just seen. But I haven't located Emily yet. Equipment's malfunctioning, experiencing some kind of interference. Don't. You. Lookout tower. Repeat, not at lookout. The radio cut out entirely. Matt stared at it, then at his surroundings. The clearing looked different now. The light had shifted, though his watch insisted only 10 minutes had passed since he'd arrived. The tower ruin seemed farther away or closer. He couldn't tell which. A sound reached him from the forest. Footsteps, multiple people, moving fast. His first thought was backup had arrived, but too soon. He'd only just called it in. Hello? He called out. The footsteps stopped, then started again from a different direction. Then another, then another. A dozen sets of feet circling the clearing, never quite visible through the trees. Matt's mind raced through his options. Stay put and wait for backup. But what if backup couldn't find him? Couldn't navigate whatever was happening here? Try to make it back to the trail. But which direction was the trail? His compass was useless, his GPS worthless. The footsteps were getting closer. He made a decision. Matt pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and started recording. If he didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence. He spoke clearly, stating his name, badge number, location, time. Described finding the inhaler, the equipment failures, the voices. He didn't mention the figure in the red jacket, couldn't bring himself to say it aloud, to make it real. A whisper reached him, so close it might have been breathed directly into his ear. She's still alive. Matt spun. Nothing there. For now. A different voice, different direction. But not for long. Not without help. Who are you? Matt demanded, still recording. Where's Emily? Down. A chorus now, overlapping, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Down where it's safe. Down where we're waiting. Down where she's calling for you. Matt? And there it was again. Sarah's voice, perfect and terrible. Come down, Matt. Claire needs you. We both need you. You're not my wife, Matt said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. Sarah's in Port Angeles at the hospital, working the morning shift in the ER. Am I? The voice shifted, became something else. Or am I down here waiting? How do you know, Matt? How do you really know anything anymore? Matt's phone buzzed in his hand. Impossible. No signal, but the screen showed an incoming call. From Sarah's number. His thumb hovered over the answer button. Every instinct screamed not to, but what if it really was her? What if something had happened and she was trying to reach him? He answered, held the phone to his ear, breathing, slow, wet, wrong. Then, come down. Not Sarah's voice anymore. Something that had worn Sarah's voice like a mask and now discarded it. Matt ended the call, hands shaking. The phone immediately rang again. Same number. He silenced it, shoved it in his pocket. It kept buzzing against his leg like a trapped insect. Think. He had to think. Emily was real. The inhaler was real. Everything else, the voices, the impossible phone call, the figure, could be explained, had to be explained. He was a rational person, a ranger, a father and husband who needed to finish this job and go home. Home. The word felt distant, like something from a dream he was struggling to remember. No. Focus. Emily Hartwell, 22 years old, graduate student, missing for 16 hours now. She was why he was here. She was what mattered. Matt forced himself to breathe slowly, to think like the trained professional he was. Assuming he couldn't trust his electronic equipment, he'd navigate old school. The sun was east-southeast. He could see patches of sky through the canopy. He'd arrived from the northwest. That meant the trail was... He oriented himself, checked the weak sunlight. That way. He started walking, deliberately not running, keeping his breathing steady. The footsteps resumed behind him, matching his pace exactly. Don't look back, don't engage. Just keep moving. The forest seemed to press in from all sides, trees closer than they should be. Matt's peripheral vision caught movement, shapes that vanished when he turned to look. He kept his eyes forward, focusing on the terrain, watching for timber wells and obstacles. A clearing opened ahead, different from the one before. No ruins here, just a perfect circle of bare earth roughly 20 feet across. In the center lay a red North Face jacket, neatly folded. Emily's jacket. Matt approached slowly. The jacket was dry, no morning dew on it despite lying exposed. He knelt, touched it carefully, still warm, as if recently removed. No blood, no tears, just a jacket, placed with deliberate care. Underneath it, Emily's phone. Matt picked it up with gloved hands, pressed the power button. The screen lit up. 18% battery. No signal, but functional. The lock screen showed a photo of Emily with friends, everyone laughing at some beach bonfire. Normal. Real. He checked recent activity. Last text sent to roommate at 3:15 p.m. yesterday, just as reported. But there were other things. Voice memos. The most recent time stamped at 6:23 a.m., less than 2 hours ago. Matt's finger hesitated over the play button. Every horror movie he'd ever seen said don't listen to the mysterious audio file. But he wasn't in a horror movie. He was a search and rescue professional trying to find a missing person. He pressed play. Static, then Emily's voice, barely audible. Don't understand, we keep hearing my mom, but she can't be here. Getting confused. Can't remember which way. More static. Then clearer. If anyone finds this, don't follow the voices. They sound like people you love, but they're not. I think they want us to go down. Into the... God, I sound crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I hit my head and this is all. The recording cut off. Matt immediately played the next one, timestamped 7:41 a.m., just over an hour ago. Breathing. Labored. Then, Mom, if this is really you, tell me something only you would know. Tell me about the summer I was 7. Tell me what happened at... A response. Another woman's voice in the background, words too muffled to make out. Emily again. No, that's not right. You weren't even there that summer. You were... A gasp. Oh God, you're not my mom. What are you? Sounds of running. Emily's breathing harsh, panicked. Then a crash, a cry of pain. Ankle. Think I twisted. Can't. Have to hide. The recording ended. One more file. Timestamped 8:15 a.m., half an hour ago. Matt pressed play with numb fingers. Silence for 10 seconds. Then Emily's voice, very quiet. I'm in a hole. One of those hollow tree things. Fell in trying to get away. Maybe 15 feet down. Can't climb out. Walls are too smooth. Phone's almost dead. If someone finds this, the hole is near the place where the trees grow in a circle. The perfect circle. There's something else down here with me. I can hear it breathing. Static. Then, so faint Matt had to press the phone against his ear. Please hurry. The recording ended. Matt was already moving, scanning the tree line around the clearing. A perfect circle of bare earth. The trees grow in a circle. He was standing in it. Emily! He cupped his hands around his mouth. Emily, it's Ranger Cooper. Can you hear me? Nothing. He started circling the clearing's perimeter, looking for any depression, any sign of the timber wells he knew riddled this area. The ground seemed solid, but appearances meant nothing with these kinds of hazards. There, a slight variation in the moss pattern, a subtle depression near a massive cedar on the eastern edge. Matt approached carefully, testing each step. The depression was real, camouflaged by sword ferns that grew right up to the edge. He knelt, pulled aside the vegetation, and revealed a hole roughly 4 feet across. The opening looked natural, organic, like the earth had simply opened up. Matt clicked on his flashlight, pointed it down. The beam revealed a shaft extending into darkness, walls made of old wood, the rotted interior of an ancient cedar. At the bottom, maybe 20 feet down, he could just make out something red. Emily! No response. Matt pulled off his pack, got out his rope and harness. Standard vertical rescue procedure: anchor the rope to something solid, rappel down, secure the victim, climb back up or wait for technical rescue if needed. He'd done this 100 times, but never alone. Never without backup. Never without first establishing radio contact and setting up a safety system. His radio crackled. Matt? Claire's voice again, drifting up from the hole. Down here, waiting, not real. Claire was in school, Sarah was at work. This was a trick, a hallucination, something. But Emily was real. Emily was down there. Matt rigged his rope around the cedar, triple-checking his knots despite his shaking hands. He clipped into his harness, tested the system. Solid. He positioned himself at the hole's edge, flashlight clamped between his teeth, and began his descent. The walls of the shaft were indeed smooth, worn by time, and wrought into an almost organic texture. His boots found minimal purchase. The rope creaked above him, the cedar groaning under his weight. 10 feet down, 12, 15. The temperature dropped with each foot, his breath now fogging in the flashlight beam. The smell changed too. Not decay, exactly, but something old. Ancient, patient, 20 feet. His boots touched bottom. Matt unclipped his descender, pulled the flashlight from his mouth, swept the beam around the chamber. It was larger than it should be. The interior hollowed out into a space maybe 10 feet across. The walls glistened with moisture, bioluminescent fungi creating patches of eerie blue-green light. In the center of the chamber lay Emily Hartwell. She was curled on her side, still breathing. Matt could see the rise and fall of her chest. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue. Hypothermia, possible head injury. Definitely a twisted ankle based on how that leg was positioned. Emily. Matt knelt beside her, checking for breathing and pulse, both present but weak. Emily, can you hear me? I'm Ranger Matt Cooper. You're going to be okay. Her eyes flickered open, focused on him with obvious effort. You're real? Yes, I'm real. We're going to get you out of here. The others, they said you were coming, but they lie. They lie about everything. Her hand gripped his arm with surprising strength. My mom was here, but it wasn't her. It knew things but got them wrong. Little things, like a photocopy with errors. I know. I heard them too. Matt pulled off his jacket, wrapped it around her. But we're leaving now. Can you sit up? With his help, Emily managed to get upright, wincing at the movement of her ankle. Matt examined it quickly. Swollen, probably sprained, possibly fractured. She wouldn't be able to climb. Okay, change of plans. I'm going to rig you into a harness, call for technical rescue, and they'll pull you up. I'll climb up after. No. Emily's hand tightened on his arm. No, you can't leave me down here, not alone. It's down here with us. Emily, listen. Matt went still and heard it. Breathing, slow, wet, coming from the darkness beyond his flashlight's reach. He swept the beam into the shadows. The chamber extended further back than he'd realized, tunneling into the earth in a way that geology shouldn't allow. The breathing came from that direction, getting closer. "We need to move. Now." Matt pulled out his second harness, started rigging Emily into it with quick, practiced movements. His hands knew the work even as his mind tried not to think about what might be approaching from that tunnel. The breathing grew louder, closer. Matt finished the last buckle, clipped Emily's harness to his rope. "I'm going to climb up and pull you after me. It's going to be uncomfortable, but..." "Matt." Emily was looking past him, eyes wide. "Matt, it's here." He turned. The thing that emerged from the tunnel might have been human once, or it might have been wearing humanity like an ill-fitting suit. The proportions were wrong, the movement wrong, the smile wrong. It had Sarah's face, Claire's face, Emily's mother's face. All of them at once, flickering between identities like a broken television. "Stay," it said with a dozen voices. "Stay down here where it's safe, where you're needed, where she needs you." Matt grabbed the rope, started climbing hand over hand, pulling himself and Emily's weight upward. Every muscle in his back screamed. The thing below reached for them with fingers that were too long, too many jointed. "You'll come back," it called after them, voice echoing up the shaft. "They always come back. This place remembers. This place waits." Matt climbed, focused on the circle of gray daylight above, on the rope burning through his gloves, on not thinking about how Emily's harness was slipping, how his arms were giving out, how the thing below was climbing after them with impossible speed. His hand broke through into open air, then his head. He pulled himself over the edge, immediately started hauling on Emily's line. She emerged seconds later, and he dragged her away from the hole, both of them gasping. The breathing from below stopped. Matt looked back. The hole was empty, silent, almost peaceful in the morning light. "We need to move," he managed. "Can you walk if I support you?" Emily nodded. Matt helped her stand, taking most of her weight. They started back the way he'd come, moving as fast as her injury allowed. The forest seemed different now, lighter. The oppressive weight had lifted. Matt's compass, when he checked it, pointed steadily north. His GPS flickered but held coordinates that made sense. They reached the main trail 40 minutes later. Matt had never been so happy to see a trail marker in his life. He keyed his radio. "Karen, this is Ranger Cooper. I have Emily Hartwell. She's injured but stable. Requesting immediate medical assistance at the Lover's Lane trailhead." The response came through clear. "Copy that, Matt. Ambulance is already en route. ETA 15 minutes. Good work." Real. This was real. Matt and Emily made it to the trailhead just as the ambulance arrived, along with 2 other rangers and a sheriff's deputy. The EMTs took over Emily's care, checking her vitals, immobilizing her ankle, wrapping her in thermal blankets. Matt gave his report, keeping it clinical. Located subject using electronic equipment and standard search procedures. Subject found in natural timber well, extracted using rope rescue techniques. No mention of voices. No mention of things that wore faces like masks. Sarah arrived an hour later, pulling Matt into a hug that felt more real than anything he'd experienced in that clearing. Claire came after school, and Matt held her for a long time, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling how warm and solid and real she was. That night, lying in bed, Sarah asleep beside him, Matt's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He almost didn't open it, almost threw the phone across the room. But something made him look. A photo of him and Emily climbing out of that timber well, taken from below, looking up. And in the darkness at the bottom of the frame, barely visible, a face. Watching. Waiting. The message below it read, "Thank you for the visit. Come back soon. We'll be waiting." Matt deleted the text, deleted the number. Lay awake until dawn, listening to Sarah breathe, reminding himself what was real. In the morning, he'd submit his report. Recommend the area around the old lookout tower be permanently closed, marked as hazardous terrain. He'd go back to work, do his job, come home to his family. But he'd never forget the way those voices had sounded, how they'd known exactly what to say, who to imitate, which memories to pull from his mind. And he'd never quite believe again that his compass pointed true north. Emily Hartwell made a full recovery. The official report listed her injuries as a sprained ankle and mild hypothermia. She went back to school the following semester, though she never went hiking alone again. Sometimes, late at night, Matt would get a text from an unknown number. Just coordinates. Always within Olympic National Park. Always near places where people had disappeared over the years. He never responded, never went to check. But he always knew exactly where those coordinates were on the map, and he always remembered what waited there, patient and hungry, wearing the faces of everyone he'd ever loved. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of what really happened in that forest? Was the entity real, or was it all in Matt's head? I'd love to hear your theories in the comments. The radio crackled to life at 6:47 a.m., pulling David from his second cup of coffee. Static, then dispatch. Sharon's voice tight with the kind of urgency that came from talking to frantic parents. Ranger Hoffman, we have a missing hiker. 23-year-old female, Sarah Mitchell. Last contact was yesterday at 4 p.m. from the Enchanted Valley Trail. Parents received a voicemail around sunset. Said she'd found something interesting off the main path. Phone's been dead since. David set down his mug, already mentally cataloging his gear. The Enchanted Valley Trail. 16 miles of dense old-growth forest, the Quinault River cutting through glacier-carved valleys, elevation gains that could exhaust experienced hikers. October meant early darkness, temperatures dropping to the low 40s at night. Copy that. Solo hiker? Affirmative. She's an environmental science graduate student from Seattle. Her research involved... Sharon paused, papers rustling. Documenting old-growth ecosystem recovery in restricted zones. Something cold settled in David's stomach. Restricted zones. The park had several areas marked off limits, some for safety, others for cultural preservation. The Quinault Indian Nation had made it clear certain areas were sacred, not to be disturbed. Did the parents mention which something interesting she found? Negative. The voicemail was brief. Mother said Sarah sounded excited, maybe a little disoriented. David grabbed his pack, already running through protocols. His fingers moved automatically, checking his GPS unit, the older Garmin model that still worked reliably in heavy canopy cover, spare batteries, first aid kit, emergency blanket, water purification tablets. He strapped his radio to his chest, tested his headlamp. I'm heading out. Estimated time to trailhead, 45 minutes. David? Sharon's voice softened slightly. Her mother was crying. Said Sarah always calls them before dark. Always. He thought of his own daughter, Emma, 7 years old and obsessed with collecting leaves. The way she'd run to him every evening to show him her newest finds, carefully pressed between wax paper. The thought of her alone in these woods. I'll find her, he said. The drive to the trailhead took him through the Quinault rainforest, morning mist clinging to Sitka spruce that had been growing since before Columbus reached the Americas. His truck's headlights cut through fog so thick it seemed solid. The forest pressed in on both sides of the road, dark and watching. David had worked Olympic National Park for 11 years. He knew these trails better than he knew his own neighborhood in Port Angeles. He'd pulled out twisted ankles, hypothermic day hikers who'd underestimated October weather. Even a cardiac arrest victim he'd kept alive with CPR until the helicopter arrived. But the missing person calls, those never got easier. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Jennifer. Be safe. Emma wants you to find the lost lady. She drew you a picture for good luck. The attached photo showed a crayon drawing of a stick figure in a ranger hat, surrounded by trees with smiling faces. His throat tightened. "Tell her I will. Love you both." The parking lot at the Graves Creek trailhead was empty except for a silver Honda Civic. Sarah's car. David pulled on his pack, 40 pounds of gear that felt like nothing after years of conditioning, and approached the vehicle. A parking permit on the dashboard, dated yesterday. Back seat visible through the window. Camping equipment, a thick notebook, camera gear. He radioed Sharon. "Found her vehicle. She came prepared for at least an overnight stay. I'm starting up the trail now." The Enchanted Valley Trail began innocuously enough, wide and well-maintained for the first few miles. David moved at a steady pace, his eyes scanning for any sign of passage. The ground was soft from recent rain, perfect for tracking. He found fresh boot prints within the first quarter mile, women's size 7 or 8, treads matching a popular hiking boot brand. The prints stayed on the main trail for the first 3 miles. Then, at mile marker 3.4, they diverged. David knelt, studying the ground. The prints led off the maintained path toward the northeast, toward an area he knew well. Too well. The boundary, rangers called it unofficially. A section of forest where the old growth was particularly dense, where the Quinault elders had specifically requested no development, no trails, no disturbance. He'd only been in there once, his second year as a ranger tracking a lost hunter. The memory still bothered him, the way the light had seemed wrong, filtered through canopy so thick it turned midday into twilight. The way sounds had echoed strangely. The hunter, when David found him, had been sitting at the base of an enormous cedar tree crying silently. He couldn't explain why. David pulled out his topo map, comparing it to his GPS. Sarah's prints led directly toward the heart of the boundary, toward an area marked on older maps as Weeping Cedar Grove. He radioed in his position and intended route, then followed her tracks into the forest. The change was immediate. One moment David was on the established trail, surrounded by the normal sounds of October forest, Douglas squirrels chattering, varied thrushes calling, the distant rush of the Quinault River. The next, he'd crossed into the boundary, and silence fell like a curtain. Not complete silence. That would have been less unsettling. Instead, sounds came muted and strange, as if he were hearing them through water. His own footsteps seemed too loud, each snap of twig echoing longer than it should. The trees here were ancient beyond measure. Western red cedars with trunks 15 feet in diameter, their bark deeply furrowed, covered in thick moss that glowed an almost luminescent green in the filtered light. Sitka spruce reached heights that hurt the neck to follow. Everywhere life grew on death. Nurse logs supporting entire ecosystems, young hemlocks sprouting from the decay of their ancestors. David had always loved old-growth forest, had proposed to Jennifer in a grove not unlike this one. But something about this place felt different, felt attentive. He shook off the thought, focusing on Sarah's tracks. They were easy to follow in the soft humus, and they moved with purpose, not the wandering pattern of someone lost. She'd been heading somewhere specific. At 9:23 a.m., he found her first campsite, a small clearing where she'd set up her tent, now collapsed and partially packed away. Her sleeping bag was still there, along with her camping stove and food bag properly hung in a tree. David touched the sleeping bag, dry, but cold. She hadn't slept here last night. Her notebook lay open on a flat rock, protected from dew by the heavy canopy. David picked it up carefully, flipping through pages of meticulous field notes. Soil pH measurements, species inventories, sketches of fungal networks. The entries were dated, each one precisely timed and located with GPS coordinates. The final entry, dated yesterday at 3:47 p.m., read, "Found something extraordinary. Approximately 800 meters NNE of camp. Tree unlike anything in my references. Cedar, but wrong. Bark patterns don't match regional species. Appears to be weeping actual sap from eye-level markings. Markings are too regular to be natural. Taking samples. We'll investigate further before dark." Below the text, she'd sketched something that made David's skin prickle, a tree trunk with deep carved symbols. Spirals, circles, what might have been faces or might have been natural whorls in the wood. And yes, dark streaks running from the carvings down the bark. Weeping. David pulled out his own GPS, inputting the coordinates from her notes. The weeping cedar grove. Of course. He continued northeast, following her tracks and her coordinates. The forest grew denser, the silence heavier. His radio crackled with static when he tried to check in. Too much canopy interference. He'd be out of contact until he returned to higher ground. At 10:15 a.m. he found the first warning. A line of stones across the path, each one deliberately placed. White river rocks, smooth and round, arranged in a perfect line perhaps 20 feet long. No geological process created patterns like that. David had seen enough trail markers to recognize intentional placement. He stepped over the line carefully, noting how the stones gleamed despite the lack of direct sunlight. Quartz maybe, or something else that caught and held what little light penetrated the canopy. 50 yards beyond the stones, he found the second warning: branches. Hundreds of them, woven together and hung from the trees to form a sort of curtain across the path. They swayed slightly in a breeze David couldn't feel, creating a soft rattling sound like bones touching. The weaving was intricate, deliberate. Someone had spent hours creating this barrier. David's hand went to his radio automatically, though he knew it wouldn't work here. He thought of Jennifer, of Emma, of the promise he'd made to come home safe. He thought of Sarah's mother crying on the phone with dispatch. He ducked under the hanging branches and kept going. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in David's situation? Share your thoughts. The weeping cedar announced itself first by smell. David had encountered plenty of scents in the forest: the sweet rot of decay, the sharp tang of sap, the earthy must of mushrooms. But this was different. Cedar, yes, but underneath it something else. Metallic, organic, like blood and pennies and earth all mixed together. Then he saw it. The tree dominated a small clearing, so massive it seemed impossible. 30 feet in diameter at least, its trunk rising straight and true before disappearing into the canopy hundreds of feet above. The bark was wrong, just as Sarah had noted. Too dark, too smooth in places, covered in patterns that might have been natural except they weren't. Spirals carved deep into the wood, concentric circles radiating from a central point. And yes, faces. Not human faces exactly, but close enough to be disturbing. Eyes too large, mouths open in what might have been screams or songs. And from every carving, dark sap wept steadily, creating black streaks down the trunk that pooled at the base. The ground around the tree was wrong too. Nothing grew within 20 feet of the trunk. Just bare earth, dark and fine as ash. The boundary between living forest and dead ground was sharp as a knife cut. Sarah knelt at that boundary, her back to David, perfectly still. Relief flooded through him. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? She didn't turn, didn't move at all. David approached cautiously, ranger training overriding the instinct to rush forward. People in crisis could be unpredictable. Hypothermia caused confusion. Head injuries meant potential aggression. Sarah, my name is David Hoffman. I'm a park ranger. Your parents are worried about you. I'm here to help you get home safely. Nothing. She remained kneeling, hands resting on her thighs, head tilted back slightly as if looking up at the tree's canopy. Her blonde hair was tangled with leaves and small twigs. Her jacket, the expensive kind serious hikers wore, was covered in dark smudges that might have been mud or might have been something else. David circled around to see her face, staying outside the dead ground boundary. What he saw stopped him cold. Sarah's eyes were open, pupils dilated so wide they nearly eclipsed the iris. She stared up at the tree with an expression of absolute rapture. Her lips moved silently, forming words David couldn't hear. Dried blood crusted beneath her nose and around her ears. Sarah? He kept his voice calm, professional. Can you hear me? Her lips kept moving. David leaned closer, trying to make out the words. Showing me everything. The roots go so deep. Can you hear them singing? They've always been singing. We just never learned to listen. Sarah, I need you to stand up. We need to get you medical attention. For the first time, she seemed to register his presence. Her head turned slowly, mechanically, until her dilated eyes fixed on him. When she smiled, blood leaked from the corner of her mouth. "The guardian is pleased," she whispered. "You came. Of course you came. That's what fathers do." David's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" "Emma drew you a picture. For good luck. But you don't need luck, David. You just need to understand." Her hand reached out, fingers stretching toward the dead ground boundary. Come see what I found. It's so beautiful. It's so old. It's been waiting so long." He took a step back. "Sarah, you're experiencing a medical emergency. Possible head trauma, severe disorientation. I'm going to help you walk back to the trail." "You can't take me from the boundary," she said, still smiling that terrible smile. "I crossed without permission. I took samples. I cut into the sacred bark." She held up her other hand, showing a small knife, its blade dark with sap. "The guardian showed me what I did wrong. It's showing me everything now. All the connections, every root and every stone and every drop of water. Do you know how many people have died in this forest, David? Their bodies feeding the trees, their bones becoming soil. Nothing is lost. Everything is held." David's radio suddenly burst to life with a screech of static so loud he flinched. Through the white noise he heard, or thought he heard, his daughter's voice, Emma crying his name. "Daddy? Daddy, where are you? It's dark and I can't find you." His hand went to the radio, fingers trembling. "Emma, baby, how did you—" The static cut off. Silence rushed back in. When he looked up, Sarah was standing. She'd crossed the boundary into the dead ground, now standing directly against the massive cedar's trunk. Her hand pressed flat against the weeping carvings. "She's not really calling you," Sarah said softly. "The guardian learns from us, our memories, our fears. It's very old, David. Older than this forest. Older than the ice that carved these valleys. It protects what must not be disturbed." Her head tilted, bird-like. "You disturbed it once, 3 years ago, following the hunter. You felt it then, didn't you? The watching, the warning." He had. God help him, he had. "The hunter left," David said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I took him out safely. We didn't—" "You crossed the boundary without permission," Sarah interrupted. "But you left quickly. You didn't dig, didn't cut, didn't take samples." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I did all those things. I was so excited. A new species maybe, or a subspecies. Something to make my thesis extraordinary. I thought I'd discovered something." She pulled her hand away from the tree. Her palm was black with sap, the skin already blistering. "It discovered me instead." The sap on the tree began moving. Not dripping, moving. Flowing against gravity, the dark streaks sliding upward and downward simultaneously, forming new patterns, new faces. David watched, unable to look away as the bark seemed to breathe. And then he heard it, singing, faint and wordless, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Not Emma's voice, not human at all. It resonated in his bones, in his teeth, made his vision blur at the edges. "Can you hear them?" Sarah whispered. "The voices in the roots. They go so deep, David. Miles deep. This tree is just the tip, just the finger reaching up through the soil." She swayed slightly. "The guardian wants you to know something. Wants me to tell you." Despite himself, despite every instinct screaming at him to run, David asked, "What?" "Your daughter is standing under a cedar tree right now, in your backyard. She's looking for mushrooms. She won't find any because your wife used pesticides last spring, but she's looking anyway. She's 7 years old. She trusts you to come home. She trusts you to be safe." Sarah's ruined smile widened. The Guardian knows where that tree is, that tree's roots. It knows where everything is. Every cedar, every spruce, every hemlock in this entire forest network, all connected, all listening. David felt his legs weaken. You're lying. I'm translating. There's a difference. She took a step toward him, bare feet on the dead ground. The Guardian is giving you a choice. The same choice it gave me. Stay. Become part of the boundary, part of the protection, or leave. Now. Before you cross too far. Before it decides you've taken too much, seen too much, disturbed too much. I'm not leaving without you. You don't have me. The Guardian does. My consciousness is already rooting. Can you feel it? I can feel every tree in this forest now, every stream, every stone. It's beautiful and it's terrible and it's so much bigger than I ever imagined. Tears streaked through the blood on her face. I was so arrogant. Thought I could just take samples, write papers, make my career. Never asked permission. Never showed respect. She collapsed suddenly, hands hitting the dark ground. When she looked up, her eyes had changed. Still dilated, but something else looked out from behind them now. Something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. Go, she said, and it was her voice but not her voice. Layered. Echoing. This is our final warning. Cross the boundary again without permission, bring others here, speak of what you've seen, and we will teach you what the roots know. We will show you the weight of centuries. We will make you understand that some places are not meant for human eyes. The singing grew louder. The tree's sap began to flow faster, pooling around Sarah's hands and feet. Where it touched her skin, dark tendrils spread like veins. David made his decision. He ran. David ran through forest that seemed to fight him at every step. Roots rose where there had been clear ground. Branches snagged his pack, his jacket, his hair. The silence had broken into a cacophony of whispers, thousands of voices speaking in languages he'd never heard, in tones that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his skull. The hanging branches he'd passed earlier now seemed to reach for him. The stone line gleamed with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. He leaped over it, feeling a rush of pressure as he did, like breaking through a membrane. The moment he crossed the stones, the whispers stopped. Normal forest sounds rushed back in, his own ragged breathing, the crack of twigs, a raven calling somewhere above. His radio crackled to life. Vid! David, respond, we've lost your... Sharon! He gasped into the radio, still running. I'm here. I found Sarah Mitchell. She's... What could he say? How could he explain? She's experiencing severe psychological trauma, possibly drug-induced psychosis. She needs immediate medical evacuation. Copy that. What's your current position? He checked his GPS with shaking hands. Approximately 1 click northeast of her campsite. I'm heading back now. She's... He stopped, breath catching. She's refusing evacuation. May need sedation. Get a medical team to the trailhead. The lie tasted like ash. But what was the alternative? She's being absorbed by an ancient tree spirit because she violated sacred ground? He reached Sarah's campsite in record time, grabbed her packed gear as evidence, and kept moving. The forest felt normal again, just trees and moss and the distant sound of water. But every shadow seemed to watch him. Every gap between trunks seemed to hide something waiting. It took him 3 hours to reach the trailhead. 3 hours of hiking that felt like running through a nightmare he was slowly waking from. When he finally emerged onto the parking lot, a Park Service truck and an ambulance were waiting. Sharon met him, her expression tight with concern. Where is she? David set down Sarah's gear carefully. His hands were steady now. His voice was calm. I need to file a full report. Get me to a computer. David, where is Sarah Mitchell? He looked Sharon in the eye and did what he'd been trained never to do. He lied to a direct superior. She got away from me, ran deeper into the restricted zone before I could stop her. She was hallucinating, talking about guardians and singing trees. She appeared to have taken some kind of hallucinogenic substance, mushrooms maybe, or something else she found in the forest. I tried to bring her out, but she became combative. I had to choose between forcing a confrontation that could injure us both or retreating to call for backup. Sharon's eyes searched his face. You're saying we need a full search and rescue operation? No. The word came out harder than he'd intended. I'm saying we need to seal that area off, mark it as dangerous terrain. The restricted zone exists for a reason. Sarah Mitchell chose to violate those restrictions. He swallowed hard. She's been in there for over 24 hours, ingesting unknown substances, experiencing severe psychological breakdown. If we send more people in, we risk more casualties. That's not your call to make. Then call the Quinault Nation elders. Ask them about the Weeping Cedar Grove. Ask them what happens to people who disturb sacred ground without permission. Sharon's face paled slightly. You actually found it? The tree from the old stories. So the rangers knew. Some of them, at least. The older ones. The ones who'd been here long enough to learn what wasn't written in any official park documentation. I found Sarah Mitchell experiencing a psychotic break next to a very large, very old cedar tree, David said carefully. Whatever else I saw or didn't see is going in my report, but I'm recommending we don't send anyone else into that area. Not without proper cultural consultation, not without permission from the people who've been protecting this forest for thousands of years. Sharon studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Write your report. I'll make the calls. The official story went like this. Sarah Mitchell, graduate student, entered a restricted area of Olympic National Park without authorization. She became disoriented, possibly due to environmental exposure or ingestion of toxic plant matter. Despite search efforts, she could not be located. The area was sealed pending environmental assessment and cultural consultation with the Quinault Indian Nation. Her parents fought the decision, of course, demanded continued searches, threatened lawsuits. David met with them once, in a supervisor's office with Sharon present. He looked Sarah's mother in the eye and told her he'd done everything he could. He didn't tell her that her daughter's last coherent words had been about roots and singing and the weight of centuries. He didn't tell her that sometimes late at night he heard whispers that sounded like Sarah's voice, translating messages from something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. He didn't tell her that he'd burned his uniform from that day, scrubbed his skin raw in the shower, thrown away his boots even though they'd cost $300, that he'd driven to his house in the middle of his shift and found Emma exactly where Sarah had described, standing under the cedar tree in their backyard, looking for mushrooms that weren't there. He'd cut that tree down the next weekend, told Jennifer it was diseased, might fall on the house, paid a removal service to grind out the stump, every root, every trace. His daughter had cried. Jennifer had asked him if he was feeling okay. He'd said yes and meant no. 3 months later, in January 2009, David transferred to Mount Rainier National Park, told everyone he wanted new challenges, higher altitude experience. Didn't tell anyone that he couldn't stand to look at Olympic's forests anymore. Couldn't walk between old-growth cedars without feeling watched. Couldn't hear the wind in the branches without hearing whispers underneath. On his last day, he drove to the Graves Creek trailhead one final time. Sarah's car was gone, towed away months ago. The trail looked innocent in winter sunshine. Inviting even. David stood at the trailhead for a long time, remembering the stone line, the hanging branches, the weeping cedar, remembering Sarah's ruined smile and the thing that had looked out from behind her eyes. Then he placed 3 smooth stones on the ground at the trail's entrance, white quartz he'd collected from a riverbed miles away. He arranged them carefully in a line, a marker, a warning, a request for permission he knew he'd never actually receive. He drove away and never went back. 20 years later, in 2028, a team of environmental scientists would petition for access to the restricted zones in Olympic National Park's old-growth forest. They'd argue that climate change research required comprehensive data collection, including previously protected areas. They'd have government support, university backing, the best equipment money could buy. The Quinault Nation would say no. The scientists would argue, would threaten legal action, would claim indigenous protections couldn't override federal research mandates. And deep in the forest, in a grove no map showed and no trail reached, sap would weep from ancient carvings, and something vast and patient would listen to the argument with interest and wait. The boundary, after all, had held for centuries. It could hold for centuries more. Some places, some things, were never meant to be disturbed. Thank you for reading to the end. If you appreciated this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of Sarah's fate? I'd love to read your theories in the comments.